So we've seen it time and time again, President Trump firing up his base on the campaign trail, slamming Bob Mueller, slamming the media, slamming the Democrats. But is he touting his economic message strongly enough to stop what could be a blue wave in November? All right, let's talk to Karl Rove about this, former Bush 43 Deputy Chief of Staff. And I've seen some of your comments, Karl. Obviously, you think the president's gone too far right here with these attacks on the media?
Well, I think it's over the top, and the question is it constructive? And the answer is no. I think those rallies show that the hardcore love this. When he goes after the media hammer and tong, they love it. But they're not going to decide the outcome of the election. Take the Fox News poll in July. 46% of the registered voters surveyed approve of the job the president is doing. 51 disapprove. But the strongly approve, that's the base. Those are the people who are showing up at those rallies. 28% strongly approve. 41% strongly disapprove. So the president's got to be doing more to get at the 18% of the electorate who somewhat approve and the 10% who somewhat disapprove. And I don't think these attacks on the media do it. They didn't work for George H.W. Bush in 1992 when he had a much milder version of it, which was annoy the media, vote for Bush. And I don't think they do it when he calls the media, when President Trump calls the media the enemy of the people today.
Yeah, talk about annoyed, the enemy of the people. Boy, mild is not even the word. That is quite a change over the point.
Right.
So, you know, Tom Bevan from Real Clear Politics was on with us last hour, and we started to get into this a little bit in terms of what districts the president can be most effective in. I remember from covering Pennsylvania in the special election, you know, his effectiveness in campaigning in these general elections seems somewhat limited. He's not on the ballot after all. And I guess tomorrow in Ohio we'll find out how effective it is as well, right?
Right, we will. But look, if the White House wants to come out of the election with a wind at their backs. First of all, they need to restrain the president from talking about a red wave. We've only had a few elections. Think about it. In 2002, Republicans gained seats. George W. Bush president, Republicans gained seat in the House and Senate. 1998, Bill Clinton is under impeachment. There's a backlash to it. Democrats gained seats in the House, don't gain in the Senate. And the previous time was 1934, in the midst of the Depression, with FDR, when the Democrats gained seats in the House and Senate. Otherwise, the party in power loses seats. Now, Republicans might gain seats in the Senate, but they're very likely, in fact, in all likelihood, going to lose seats in the U.S. House, governorships, statewide offices, and state legislative seats. So I think the president will be better positioned by saying, you know, we got an uphill climb, and we're going to do everything we can to win as many races as possible.
We'll hold on to the House because, you know, if you have to lose or not lose 23, right? So just about any analyst will tell you you're going to lose some, whether they get to the 23 or not. So what's the strategy then? It's not you don't think it's going the enemy of the people stuff and getting the media fired, the crowd fired up at the media. What should the president be doing if you were giving him advice?
Well, we got a hint in the July Fox News poll. If the president was asked, the voters were asked, do you approve or disapprove the president on a number of issues? The number one issue, the only issue in which he was above water, was the economy.
Right.
The economy's good. And Friday we saw it. Friday morning we had a good jobs number. We had revisions in June and May. We had average of 200,000 jobs over the last year. We had unemployment drop to 3.9. We had African American and Latino unemployment drop. We had the percentage of workers, people entering the workforce rising. And what does the president do? At 11:37 p.m., he tweets an attack on LeBron James. And what are we talking about on Saturday? We're talking about that, not about the economy.
I think I was talking about this earlier, but I was out on an oil rig, and you're in Texas last week, and just talking to some of the guys out there was really interesting because, they're mostly conservatives, but and would support a conservative candidate, and a lot of them, educated engineers, what have you, and they say, these tweets and all this kind of stuff, it's crazy, but you know what? I'm doing well. The economy's well. The taxes have been coming down, so that they do like the policy, even if they're turned off by some of this stuff. I'm sure they're not the only one. So it's interesting. I want to get you on trade, Karl, before we let you go, and I'll play something for you first. And then the president has kind of shrugged off the concerns over the retaliation from the Chinese and what have you. But here he is talking in Ohio at a rally that he wants lawmakers to kind of back off in his own party. Take a listen.
But I don't like it when a senator who I like, and there are a number of them, or when a congressperson who I like comes into the White House Oval Office, they want to see me. Sir, we'd really like you to stop treating these countries so bad. I said, wait a minute, we have a tremendous, massive deficit. We're losing a lot of money. It doesn't matter, sir. We believe in free trade. I said, okay, let me ask you a question. They're charging us a 50% tariff. We're charging them a 20% tariff. Do you think that's okay? No, sir, it's really not. We want free trade. I said, what's free when they charge us and we can't charge them? What is going on here?
Another issue that he's still winning with on his base, wouldn't you agree? And how does it play, though, in traditional Republican circles?
What's interesting is the confusion on this, because is the president a mercantilist who believes the only good trade deal is one where you buy more from us than we buy from you?
Right.
Is he a guy who's in favor of managed trade, or is he a free trader? When he talks about free trade, lowering obstacles, tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers to the export of American goods abroad, I'm all for him. Go do it. But cut some deals. I mean, think about this. We're now nearly a year and 3/4 into his term. George W. Bush did deals with 13 countries. We only have free trade agreements with 16 countries. George W. Bush did 13 of them, right. And we already had 2 of them, one of them done, and on the second one almost done. And the president, I hope, is close to a free trade deal with Mexico. But let's be consistent and say our goal is to reduce tariff barriers abroad to our tariff barriers. And if you won't do that, rather than starting a trade war, go to, particularly on Chinese practices stealing our intellectual property, go to the WTO and a united front with our other trade allies and get those practices nixed.
Real quick point, Carl. Have you seen any data that would tell you that he's getting hurt politically by this policy with his base? Or
yes, I have.
Okay,
I mean, look. Missouri, Indiana, North Dakota. I mean, think about this. In North Dakota, which he won by 36 points, okay. Virtually every single soybean contract from China. They sent 85% of their soybeans to China. All of those were canceled, and they're scrambling to find additional markets. And as a result, prices are declining among soybeans. They're down, I think, nearly 40% from their high, down 20% from the time that they began canceling the contract. So, yeah, it's starting to hurt. But right now they're willing to give the president the benefit of the doubt. They're not going to be willing to give it to for a long time if we don't start seeing some results.
We'll talk to you soon, Carl. Great analysis as always. We appreciate it.